Wonderful. So let me start again. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you guys dialing from. Thank you for joining this virtual roundtable. We have reached a threshold in innovation, a moment where systems don't just store data, they perceive it. A moment where systems are tracking your gaze, hearing your emotions in your voice, following our gestures, even anticipating what am I going to say next. All of our digital environments are evolving faster than our governance can keep pace. And with every leap forward, the stakes are getting higher and higher, not just in compliance, but for trust, for safety, and for accountability. And that's what today is all about. This isn't a panel. This is a round table, a place for clarity, not necessarily performance. There is no hierarchy here as far as I'm concerned. For me, I have invited you on the same grounds as my peers, as experts. So all there is just expertise, curiosity, and a will to solve what others may think as unsolvable. So let's approach this session with intention. Let's speak openly. Let's keep our reflections sharp and focused. Respect each other's voice at this table. You are encouraged to unmute and speak. However, we've dedicated some time for just really deep diving into your perspective. We're not here to debate whether trust matters or not. We're here to actually architect it together. So thank you for being here. You're the ones that are bold enough to engage with complexity and lead through it. So let's begin. So here's our journey. We'll begin by naming the invisible gap that we are all navigating. I call it the trust vacuum. Then we'll have a chance to bring your own lived experiences into the room, sharing the moments when visibility or evidence or accountability broke down when you're dealing with any kind of third party, any kind of system that you brought in from outside of your organization. From there on, we'll examine why third-party risk management is failing in today's immersive or AI-generated, AI-integrated systems. Systems that stream not just data, as I mentioned, but behavior and inference. All that will set the stage for the solution, which XRSI believes that we have, after years of research, created, curated a solution. We'll walk through Responsible Data Governance, RDG, the very first certification that is purpose-built to govern data flows, provide real-time indicators across vendors, platforms, and all kinds of modalities. So you'll notice two key moments of deep audience engagement, which is first 25 minutes of icebreaker, who will tell us, where you can tell us what's keeping you up at night. Secondly, the co-creation segment, where we'll define what a trustworthy digital ecosystem must look like. And then we'll close with the real purpose, time for questions. So let's go on to the next slide. Let's take a closer look at, where this trust is breaking down. So I'm just going to take about 5 minutes to kind of really hone into and set the stage with this trust vacuum that we're dealing with. What you're seeing here is the life cycle of modern systems, specifically a large language model. It starts with inception and design, and then it moves through deployment, monitoring, revaluation, and eventually retirement. Underneath every stage, there is data. Sensitive data, behavioral data, operational data, fine-tuning inputs, user queries, user logs, model output, feedback loop, even decisions about what gets archived and what gets deleted. These aren't just abstract risks. They are live exposures. I use that word very carefully because that's really something that has been left unaddressed for a long time in the industry. These exposures of data, they're embedded in every phase of innovation. And yet, Where in the life cycle of the data do we verify governance? 99% of the time, so the breach has happened. Oh, questions like who drew the consent boundaries? Who monitors the telemetry? Who audits the model behavior? What is this model inferring? Who's accountable for users' feedback that's shaping other users' outcome? So this diagram, this isn't just a life cycle. It's a map of where trust can erode quietly, invisibly, and completely. Most organizations today have answers to what data do we collect? They put it in their 90-page privacy policy, and then they check all these boxes and stuff. But almost no one can confidently answer, where does the data go? Who all see it? What gets inferred that we never planned for? And that is the trust vacuum. It's not a single breach point. It's a systemic absence across the entire life cycle. And it's growing, not because we don't care, but because we haven't had the structure to govern this level of complexity. And that's what we are here to change together. That is what this roundtable is about. That is what this moment is about. And this is what the trust vacuum looks like in real time. If you could move on to the next slide, Liam. So look at what the trust vacuum looks like in the real time. Every second, immersive and AI integrated systems are streaming this. Eye movement, gaze duration, blink rates, emotional state, cognitive states, heart rate spikes, finger geometry, even the ears, as you know, anybody who's used the AirPods and stuff, shoulder width, gait, posture, just you name it. There was just like a millions of data streams. And that's why I kind of, in my background, you can see all this, we're flowing in this ocean of data. Data isn't just collected, it's interpreted, inferred, scored. And if you're wondering what conclusions can be drawn from all of this, look to your left. These systems are estimating health condition, race, stress level, identity, lifestyle choices, all the passive signals. And then look to your right. What most organizations still do in response to this? They ask vendors for uptime, SLAs. They sign contracts for service availability. They accept wait statements of, hey, privacy by design, but no real operational evidence behind them. Meanwhile, the systems are making decisions without transparency, without logs, or without any shared governance. So it's not just the data that's dangerous, it's this illusion of control. That is the trust vacuum in motion. The data flows faster than the oversight. And so we're here today because we know governance must keep pace with innovation before the harm occurs. And so now time to invite you all into engaging with this moment. Let's shift from insight to engagement. So we've seen just now how fast the data flows, how invisible inferences can be made, how governance offer falls behind. But now I want to hear from you. And so you can see on the screen, there is a Menti code. I would encourage you all to go on to menti.com and then use this code 16262960 at your end to provide to me. Look at what are there are three categories of pain points. The visibility gap. We don't know what these third parties, these vendors, or these developers that are like, they could be just, developers using pass-through API to develop some kind of a mixed reality environment. What are these vendors? How many of them are we working with? So visibility gap, is that your biggest pain point? Or, some vendors say, oh, we do X, but they can't prove it. So evidence is not there. Or is it just the trust? Who's responsible when something goes wrong, etc. So pick the one that resonates most with you. We're going to get real-time input from this panel. And then this applies to everyone, not just, who onboard vendors. Everyone, please take 10 to 15 seconds and just kind of choose which one appeals to you most. And we've got 6, 7, 8 folks inputting. And let me see, we have a lot more people on here, right? 22 of us. Let me go ahead and add my input as well. So I encourage you, we're just going to take a few seconds to just provide that input. So please, if you're able to, go to menti.com 16262960. You can do it on your phone. I see 13 folks are already on here providing the input. And I understand, Jane. Jane, you're welcome to. If you're not able to input, you're welcome to, I would certainly invite you in to speak about this. So if you're welcome to then, share your pain point via voice. So we see clear indicators. There is the indicator that the evidence gap seems to be on top of everyone's mind, although we want to engage with everybody as much as possible. So now let's go a little bit deeper. I'd love to invite, and this is the section that you are here for, to really dive into what is lacking here in today's pace of innovation where we really want to create trust as well. So if you have a story, an example, or just an observation, short and sharp is great. Let's hear from each other. What are your lived experiences that we can learn from with respect to the evidence gap that you're talking about? Sometimes, we don't see these gaps until we've lived through them. So few examples, for example, for me, I remember going through Linden Labs, GDPR 2018, Linden Lab, for those of you who don't know, I was the head of security at Linden Lab. That's the creator of Second Life, the gaming platform or the de facto virtual world. And people claimed, GDPR compliant, but like, how do you prove that? What does that even mean, etc. Those kinds of evidence gap definitely existed at that time. So let me pause here and see if you want to raise your hand and kind of share with us what exactly is what is your perception of or story around the evidence gap or visibility gap. Anyone is welcome to share your input. Now we have 11 folks that are like, hey, lacking evidence to really ensure what's going on. And please feel free to unmute yourself and start sharing.
Kavya, it's Julia Scott here, and
Hey, Julia.
I work with the Medical Council for XRSI, and so for the use cases there, the issues there, I know I went into the evidence gaps because what we see often are big jumps between a proof of concept and then claims about what the intervention or the diagnostic is able to do within a VR application or an NEXR application. That may be through eye tracking, spatial data, motor movements, and the acceleration to commercialization is there's a lot of pressures for that, and it's often done with or it can be done without robust evidence generation. And so for the end user to understand where those claims are coming from or how that data drives that conclusion about, say, your risk of Alzheimer's disease or how you're recovering from your stroke in your rehab, those are areas that are very much black box, and there we can do a better job of communicating how the inferences are made to the end user, whether that be the person struggling with the condition or a physician or clinician.
That makes sense. Yeah, and we've often talked about it, Julia. Thank you so much for sharing. It is a really big challenge in the healthcare industry, especially with the intersection of emerging tech. So thank you for sharing that. I would love to invite folks that have specifically not participated just so they could add their input. Jane, would you like to unmute yourself and share? I know you weren't able to add your input to Menti.
Yeah, thank you very much, Katja, and thank you for everything that you're doing to lead in this space. One area that I think we're going to be encountering sooner rather than later is issues like brain-computer interfaces. So you've raised a whole lot of issues that we know about with kind of XR VR, and I think this is going to kind of escalate all of those questions. So that's the first point. The second point that I want to make is I don't know that developers and the people who are creating these programs understand the issues that you're raising, that we're speaking about. And so this idea of the ethical development of systems is something of a mystery to developers who might be prepared to do it, and the companies, maybe they don't know or they don't care. So I think there's a whole lot of information that needs to get out there to both government and companies and developers about these risks, and to the general population, because there's massive ignorance. So that's just what I'd like to say at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And absolutely agree. This sense of awareness around the real, true challenge around these things. We're pretty much like onboarding things or adding extensions and adding things just because we have to. We just want to do the work. So completely agree with you. It's really a challenge which we need to address. Thank you for that. And Fox?
Yeah, really to as a developer in immersive systems and a professor teaching the next generation of developers and folks making these kinds of applications, I absolutely agree with what Jane just said. There's a lot of ignorance around kind of the ethical implications of many of the integrations that we're doing around sensor fusion and AI enhancement of data that we're collecting. So I think ignorance is a huge problem in our industry around kind of the long-term ethical implications of the systems that we're building. So just wanted to kind of hit that point again that Jane brought up just now.
Thank you, Fox, for that reaffirmation. Oscar?
Yeah, totally agree with Fox there, that and with Jane as well, that massive not only ignorance but also misinformation about the systems. So I mean, there's so many things going on that we have to take care of regarding ethical development and ethical implementations, not only from a corporation standpoint, like as companies, but when you think about the implementation of AI systems or complex systems that require either AI or face recognition, I mean, there's the whole enchilada of things you could actually have working within the government is that you have no accountability. That's a major issue. Like who's guilty of what when something bad happens, right? And within the idea of this massive ignorance around the subject is that, I mean, there isn't even the awareness to be worried about stuff, since they don't even know what they should be worried about. So there's a lot of education to be done within the government. I work mostly consultating for governments in Latin America. And what I've seen so far is like they have no idea, and they all kind of have this FOMO to get on the boat of implementing some sort of AI system, be that on which security or policing, or or trying to improve certain aspects of government. And they crash with a lot of issues, not only from companies providing the services to the states, because governments on their own, they have not the capacity for innovation at that scale. So the companies need special permissions to access information that is not happening because nobody knows about this. We have, at least in Latin America, I live in Chile, and we have a good law for data protection, but most of the governments in the region doesn't have anything yet. I mean, they're always like talking about it and trying to implement these things, but there's a lot of ground to cover, and I think that RDG becomes a real important anchor for something like a foundation to build upon. And I think that is really important in the process that we are right now. We need solid foundations to walk on so we can be able to develop and create things based on good and solid foundations.
Thank you, Oscar. And for those who are not quite familiar, because Oscar is also our LATAM region advisor, he's familiar with what RDG does. So those who are not, just hang tight. I'm going to explain to you why these challenges is what prompted us to create that foundation and, what RDG is all about. Liz, yeah, go ahead, please. Thanks, Oscar.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. I was also having some internet issues. I'm Liz Rothman. I'm with XRSI as well, doing legal affairs work. And I think, all of these points are so interesting. And going back to Julia's points in healthcare, I think I'm seeing the same thing in the legal field where there's a lot of hype and a lot of interest around what AI may be able to do. And then certainly a lot of companies hyping up their products and telling, maybe what they see as the best case ultimate scenario of what it could do. But actually finding out where those gaps are is very, very difficult, especially when you're talking about large language models and where the limitations of those are. And so that's why I picked evidence gaps, is that I think that there's, just a tremendous amount of hype around what can be done, and then, about the concerns around confidentiality of data, going into those systems, client confidential information, and just the wide array of concerns that come along with these systems. And then the other side of it, the sort of hype and advertising that is coming out of a lot of companies. It's very, very difficult to show where the true lines are. And I think that goes along with all of these points about education around why it is really important to look at what's happening to all of that data and what's happening with these systems, and to truly know where we are at this time with capabilities and what could be the outcomes of where that data is used and, downstream effects of it. And the education around that gets very tricky when people don't understand it and also don't quite care to the extent that the people on this call do, or don't understand why there could be such deep implications for the kind of tethered use of that data by various entities, whether private or governmental. And so I think drilling home of those points of why this is something that should be cared about beyond the, it being the kind of interesting thing for legislatures to look at the moment, but what actual downstream effects it will have for us as human beings and in all of our various professions, I think is really important.
Absolutely. Thank you, Liz, and thank you for, all of the XRSI advisors. You are the human intelligence that must remain in the loop. As our vision suggests, we are the human intelligence in the loop, and that's why I'm really grateful to you all for adding this to the roundtable. I'd love to invite just one other person before we close this particular segment and move into more of a solution building, architecting what trust should look like.
I wanted to add a couple of things. I
Sure.
somehow
was
don't
just
have the
gonna
raised.
call upon you.
I don't have the raised hand somehow. I'm not trying
No
to find
worries.
it.
No
But
worries.
anyway, no, I agree with everybody. We know the consequence of what would happen when, there's a lot of data collected, but there's no regulations on it. With seeing what happened with 23andMe, they're getting bought out and bankrupt, and somebody else is going to have a genomic data for a lot of people. That could, we don't know what they would do with it. 23andMe had said, they're not going to sell it to insurances. Now insurances can look at that data and not give care to somebody and not have pre-authorization, which is, can actually lead to a lot of issues. So I'm glad we are talking about this. And as a vendor, we are also a company that, works on VR. We collect kinematic data, but, it's all de-identified. So we really don't know who our patients are. And that's how it's done on our side. And then we started to work on eye tracking data too right now. But when it's eye tracking, there's always a display that shows we are collecting eye tracking data. So they know what's happening, even for patients and for therapists. And as a company, we have ethical standards that we're not going to sell this data to anybody. It is just data for for clinicians to see how they can improve patients' life. But larger companies like Meta and Microsoft and OpenAI and everybody, they're all moving towards getting to AGI first, and they don't really care about, as you said, regulations, patient, our information, our data, everything that everybody is sharing. And we have heard things like even on OpenAI, if you go and delete your history, it still has your data, still does. There's no way out of it. So it is a big problem. I'm not fully sure what the solutions are, but it is definitely something that needs to be addressed and talked about. And for developers, as I think somebody mentioned, I think Oscar or somebody else, their goal is to just build, not think about regulations. Yeah. So I agree with everything that everybody's saying, and it is very scary. Yeah.
Thank you, Veena. And
Yeah.
thank you for all these years. You're supporting the cause and trying to sort of learn from XRSI's human intelligence. We call it human intelligence in the loop. One thing that, most CEOs talk about is oh, we don't collect this data or we de-identify this data. I have a fundamental problem with that narrative because why should you not be able to collect, process, and really do something with the data? And when you de-identify it, you're kind of losing a lot of actual thing that you can put into solutions. So what if like we could trust the CEO, the people, what if we could build the culture of trust and let you actually, not just Meta and the big giants who have, hey, here's 4% of the revenue, let's go business as usual. The small, medium suffer. So I want to now switch to what could be the solution. So just the one slide back, Liam, what is the solution for what could be a potential solution that we can come up with? So from these things, what do we need to address these pain points? We talked about the pain points, the developers or, people taking on the data, but what could be that? When it comes to the evidence gap, what's the solution that could tell you, okay, we can trust this person or this entity? Uh, just to kind of think about like, hey, what do I really need here? Do I just need the ability to collect? Or maybe if I could just have some kind of label or some kind of a, deeper assessment and not just collection, but what about inferring something later on that you might find useful, which a lot of companies do that. They collect and collect and collect. I mean, Second Life, I had to deal with 16 years of unstructured data at the end when GDPR came about, just had tons of data. Yeah, so I would love to invite you guys to just really go into, you know, we've surfaced these pain points. What does it take to solve them? Not just like legacy software. We're dealing with immersive, AI integrated. So from my perspective, governance should be real time, at least, you know, trust, what could trust look like? Like think about like, when we cross the crosswalk, we've got like this green light that says, hey, it's safe to cross the crosswalk, you know? And so could there be a universal signal for this like information superhighway we are on, that this system is governed, this AI respects boundaries, this vendor is verified across all that they do with data? So deeper question, if we are building that ecosystem of trust, what should that ecosystem look like? What roles, what tools, what signal would make you feel confident that Vena's organization is safe and trustworthy? So if you chose the visibility gap, what infrastructure would let you see what's really happening? Or evidence gap, what kind of verifiable proof? Do you need like a USDA organic label so you could like shop comfortably. Like that's what I do for my daughter nowadays. So really just, I want to pull you in once again. Fox, I don't know if you want to say something, or Vina, right back at you. Like what would that be?
I have to jump off for another meeting, so
Sure.
I do have a couple of thoughts. So when you're talking about trust, one of the things that came to mind is maybe we can have a vendor trust score for the vendors, because when I am trying to download, I try not to download a lot of apps onto my phone, but when I do, I go and look at the data that they collect and or the data that they don't, other than the reviews, because I don't download any apps that says, data will be collected and they don't know what they're going to do with it. So that's giving me a trust score that I create for myself. So I think maybe there are rules and regulations, maybe you have certifications like SOC 2, but sometimes the certifications are just not enough. And then maybe sign-offs from the vendor that says they will not sell this data, and kind of also talk about all the other third-party integrations that they do have, so that the third-party integrations that they do have are also trusted, and create a trust score for that vendor to say this is a trusted member from 1 to scale of 10. They can be trusted, so we will do business with them. There's obviously a lot of infrastructure that goes in. It is hard to sometimes also keep up with, because when developers are working on code, they're bringing in libraries that to get to that outcome faster, because there are business goals that they need to get to, so they can start quickly adding different libraries that nobody knows about. So what we do in our company is we have like a list. We keep track of all the libraries that we're adding, and we also try to do open source almost all the time, and we keep track of the open source because libraries or code bases that we are adding. So maybe that's something that one of the solutions is, obviously not the full solution, just so that we know everything the ecosystem contains, and where all of this data is going. I do
Precisely.
have to jump off now.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks,
everybody.
Vina.
Yeah.
Thanks for
See-
making time.
Yeah.
And precisely, and I like the first sentence that Jane's like, it's not simple, and that's exactly like I really appreciate you all's audacity to engage with this complex subject, and wanting to like come out like with some kind of a potential solution, because it is not simple. Fox, please go for it.
So, what I think about it, I've had to work on some pretty intense systems where the data needs to be ITAR compliant. So that's a American aerospace regulation that prohibits the distribution of systems that can navigate essentially an intercontinental ballistic missile. So really, really kind of heavy regulations on some of the systems I've worked on. And there are uh, kind of expectations of quality and quality control as well as security. So I don't want to focus too much on the security part, simply because many businesses aren't familiar with them. What they are familiar with are the quality or quality control components. So one that comes up is ISO 9000, and ISO 9000 was just kind of a buzzword type of compliance in Washington, D.C., within federal contractors. So once people were aware of what ISO 9000 was, everybody wanted to be ISO 9000 compliant in order to be able to fulfill these contracts. Now, whether that was checking a box or not, I'm not 100% sure that every company was compliant in the way that they were saying that they were, but they were at least aware of what that compliance meant. And so in the point that I was trying to make in the chat was simply that showing that a company and its leadership is informed in some way goes a long way toward starting the conversation around trust. So if you're not listing ISO 9000 or CMMI level 3, or showing that you've got some structure around your project management and you've hired PMPs, if none of that is showing up in your slicks that you're sending out to your potential customers, that's a real big red flag in my industry, or has been in the past. So just a label that says you're aware of the potential concerns and that you've acknowledged it is part of the conversation for, like I said, for me in the work that I do. So having something that notifies the customer, or having something that the customer can put on their site or in their software that says, hey, we're aware of these potential issues. We've acknowledged it. We've done the best that we can, or we've gone through this specific process. Here's the logo that we're using to message out to the world that we're doing our due diligence. Like I said before, I think we'll go a long way toward messaging out to folks that, hey, you can trust us. You can trust how we manipulate your data, or how we use your data, or how we store it. That's what came to mind on my side.
Yeah, trust but verify, and that we are, the claims to like, hey, currently in the Valley is like, trust me, bro, kind of culture, but we really need some independent validation of whether are you really trustworthy. So yes, thank you, Fox. Great insights there. Shiva, Rosario, Oita, Kalia, anybody want to just, share what could be a potential solution, how those needs could be addressed, anything that comes to your mind? Vandana, please. See your hand up, Vandana.
You're muted.
You are muted at the moment.
Yeah, sorry.
There you go.
I'm coming into this from a very operationalizing implementation side of making sure that we kind of close the trust gap or visibility gap or evidence gap. But coming to the trust gap, from my experience, what I see is, by and large, there is always something called the vendor scope creep. What it means is, you start off with a simple model from a vendor to do summarization, but then it's just in their nature to really introduce or maybe infer more data, and making sure that you do profiling, for example, child profiling or emotional manipulation, those kinds of things, without the knowledge of the company. So this is a real problem. And how do we deal with that? That is a big headache. First of all, trust score is a good thing, but as I said, this is post-contractual process that they're indulging in. So contractual guardrails is very important, but are we able to capture this particular problem? No. So what do? We need to have what you say post-production kind of monitoring. So it's like to capture the model drift. So for example, you set forth to do something, but then you analyze the output later on, and you see that's not the only thing they are doing. So there are many techniques we are trying to devise, and we're still trying to. There's a huge knowledge gap there. So yeah, so trust coding is one of them, but as I said, it doesn't fully answer problems like this. That's one of my thought.
Yeah, and what could potentially then, Vandana, like in a perfect world, since we're architecting
Sure.
that trust model, in a perfect world, what could that be? And while you think about it, I want to pull in other folks. I saw, who was it? Shea had unmuted. Shea, do you want to speak to it a little bit?
Hi, Kavya. Yes, I just wanted to add, I think at this point, transparency is really the answer. People want to see the transparency as to what the companies are doing to verify the data to keep people safe. For me personally, and I didn't mention earlier, Kavya, that I do a lot of consulting, I do a lot of AI training, and my issue personally is I feel like a lot of misinformation. So I do a lot of training and images come up, for example, if I ask for a historical figure and it'll be a different likeness than what you'll see in books. Okay. So if I can see more of the sources where the AI are pulling these things from, where they're getting this information from. That would make me a lot more secure. So the transparency and seeing the sourcing where they're getting this information from would, I think, would make a lot of people feel more confident in these companies and, you know, in these images from me that is being created right in front of me. So it's transparency and the sources where they're getting this from, you know, where they're fact checking all this knowledge and information from. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. And that's a really good point. It actually reminds me of the very early days. We were trying to tackle this data specific classification. It was like 2019. And Fox, who is still with us and has been there since day one, brings up this word about art collectors. Remember, Fox, when you talked about what do you call the word that you brought up was
Provenance.
there you go. That was the word provenance. So Shia, what you're saying is like has stuck with us and stayed with us, and it's part of our next chapter, the RDG certification. Provenance of the data is such a key here. It's not the main primary goal, but it is an underlying foundation that contributes to building trust. So thank you for sharing that, and thanks, Fox. I actually didn't know the word back then, and then it's been such a critical thing for any time you want to build trust around the data. We have a little bit of time or not. Padmaja, I want to just quickly check in with you. I think we have time for at least one other. Yeah, here we go. Kalia, good to see you again, and please share with us. You know, you have such a remarkable experience around identity, data, etc. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, what comes to mind, oh goodness, there. Okay, sorry, I can see you again. What comes to mind is some of the protocols that are starting to be written. Like basically, I've spent 20 years working with a community of nerds to build a bunch of Lego bricks, and now the Lego bricks are done mostly, and now we get to build things with them. And so I'm like listening to this conversation about what people want. It's like now there actually is ways to do data provenance, data tracking throughout the life cycle of someone's engagement with a company in a way that just was not possible 5 years or for sure 20 years ago. So I think part of it is also like it's like creating like reasons for companies to adopt this to grow trust, but also like it's not impossible to do the things that you're asking for, whereas it in some ways it kind of was before. So there's protocols like JLink, there's all the work going on about media authenticity that could be applied inside the enterprise, not just to like tracking the life cycle of media data. CTPA and the Content Authenticity Initiative are working on those protocols. So anyways, just to say that I think there's tools now that if people are motivated to build products can solve some of these problems in new ways. That's enough for me.
Thank you, Kalia. Yeah, I completely agree. 2018, I was just pulling my hair out. I'm like, how are we going to demonstrate GDPR? We don't have anything for accounting for unstructured data. There was just so much Second Life data, and things have definitely changed over the course. Oscar, and then I
Yeah,
think
one
that's,
last thing.
yep,
Yeah,
yes,
just a
please.
quick one. That thinking about all these things that are being said is that, you know, what comes to mind is that I do agree that there are a lot of tools out there that we can use for different parts of this, either validation or, you know, provenance or, you know, what we provenance is basically traceability, right? Where's that data coming from? Where's it going to head out to, and what is going to happen to it? But when I think about this, I mean, this is from like this is what should happen. But then I think about different company sizes and how different companies and different vendors are able to sell to different entities, and you know the scope of what they can do from, you know, a very small company from a very big company regarding how much they can invest in using these tools. That becomes an issue, right? And I think that I heard before also that certifications are a way to build trust. I totally agree with that. But we need to think also how we can, think about solutions that are not only for big companies, but also for smaller ones that are using products from third-party vendors. Because I think that that's another humongous issue that we have right now. It's not only because so far I think that the conversation has been around edge, using edge AI, but when we think about on-premise, and when we think about like the where the real like structured data and that has so many levels of complexity just to touch that data, since then you have to work on premise and you cannot do like training off premise and then bring back the trained process and whatnot. That's a lot of money. So I'm thinking is can we implement solutions that are as transversal as possible and that can take into consideration not only the developer or the agency that's developing the solution, but also that chain of command as to it eventually ends up in OpenAI mostly. So what happens then? What's the accountability with that final end company that you have no control over?
I love that. And thank you for, highlighting that very piece where, um, different companies, different sizes, the agility of solution is really, really important. Thank you for hinting on that. And I love what Liam put in the chat is data is the root of trust at this time. I mean, really, the whole idea is to kind of flipping the script, as you will see, we really aspire to do with XRSI certification and RDG, and over time, many more standards to come down. I want to take anybody else, any other thoughts right now, because we still want to leave time for question and answers. Before I present to you a bit of a case for XRSI responsible data governance that we are presenting sort of after hearing you. I think we're going the right way. Always there is room for improvement because this standard that we put out is an agile standard. So all of these inputs are going to be captured and then further researched and put into solution building.
So
Anybody
I,
else? Yep.
This Oita Coleman, I want to follow up on something that Jane put in the chat, and it's relative to consumer pressure. In a lot of ways, I think that is going to become one of the avenues for change. And so it's important that the consumers provided with tools and avenues about how educating them on how to advocate. And I think that's one of the things that I've seen missing is we all in this space are struggling, right? And trying to figure out what to do and how do we affect change. But those who are most affected by it, they know they understand and hear us talking around them about data privacy issues, about trust, but they are really don't necessarily have the tools or the vocabulary to be able to affect change and advocate for themselves. So to me, I think that's one, moving forward, how do we provide them with the language, vocabulary, the avenues for, I don't want to say necessarily lobbying, but grassroots effort to trying to, advocate for change, especially in a space where we're seeing, here, there's a moratorium on states enacting laws, right? I mean, so you're here and we're in this space. And so what do? We shouldn't sit back and wait, but in the meantime, what's the right way, and how can we as not just work with companies, with vendor third parties, but the consumer piece is so critical to help them understand what the challenges are.
Thank you, Oida. So beautifully put, and just directly speaks to that trust gap.
Yes.
And based on everything that you're saying, I mean, I imagine a world where we flip the script and be like, hey, if you don't got this, I'm not going to trust you, that
Yeah.
consumer model,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
When I
Yeah,
go
someone
to
put that
shop for USDA organic, like I'm like, oh, that's like I'm not even touching that thing if it's not. It's my
Right,
minimum
right,
bar. I
right.
love that. And that certainly has got to be the way we, you know, march forward towards a potential solution. So if there are no other current input, and you're still welcome, I want to leave time for question and answer. I would love to then, you know, kind of tee up. For those who don't know, back in the days, I was the third-party security advisor analyst for Facebook back in 2016. That was a long time ago. And I was building that sort of system while analyzing all these evidence and stuff for various kind of vendors. Time has changed, things have progressed, innovation has happened. I feel that there are ways that our current model is failing. So I've kind of lined up top 5 ways that it's failing, and then I want to present to you the case of RDG. Liam, if we could move to the next slide. And yeah, so let's step back a little bit and name all that we've seen, heard, and felt. And what it's really pointing to, as far as I, you know, based on my experience, all the things that we've heard, is traditional third-party risk management was built for a different era. It assumes that static system. It assumes that, oh, structured data, control boundaries. So that's not the world we're operating in. So here, what you're seeing is what I think is, and based on the research from all of XRSI team, is these aren't just theoretical gaps. We're blind to emotional, behavioral, biometric signals being captured. We're just blind. Responsibility is shared, but the accountability is missing. Like, whose collar can I catch? Like, you know, and then even if there is an accountability, it comes after something bad happens. So throughout this entire life cycle, we've like tons of data exposure. AI is deployed, various forms of AI models, but we lack the logging, the traceability, and an oversight. Vendors are saying the right thing, just like Vandana was saying, but we can't prove that they are doing the right thing. And then there are these checklist boxes, but we don't necessarily govern that underneath data layer that is the foundation for trust, the root of trust, like Liam was saying. So this isn't really a critique from me. It is, I see it as a crossroad. It's a crossroads because until now, there has been standards, and like Oita was saying, what do we do? Regulation, there's a moratorium. Now is the time to upgrade our standards, to assume responsibility and step forward towards a trustworthy trust ecosystem. So a real-time standards that are designed for some real-time data streams for immersive environment, AI governance at the vendor level. And that's what we're talking about. Responsible data governance certification. It doesn't just check for risk, it measures governance maturity, it makes accountability operational, and it gives us proof before promises. So most importantly, what this certification does, and thanks Liam for pulling up that slide, it really just gives you a way to see, verify, and trust that system that you're relying on or you're about to rely on. So now that we've seen these gaps that we talked about, we've named the needs that we need. Let's talk about what actually fills the space. And that's what it does. XRSI Responsible Data Governance Standards. Not a theory, not a white paper. It's a global certification system. It's purpose-built to address the exact failures we just talked about. So I just want to point to, 7 goals. Data lifecycle oversight, because governance doesn't stop at data collection. The entire data lifecycle, all these points of, points of exposure of data, role-based accountability, because if you can't govern what no one knows. So like, do I know what my responsibility really is with respect to data? Because everyone in the organization touches data. So everyone's got to have some accountability there. Then standardizing processes for consistent, repeatable risk management, not just ad hoc reaction, oh, something bad happens, we got to do X. No, no, no. Then third-party data governance, which is just like absolutely every system must have that because we're constantly integrating with various systems. So risk isn't only you're only as safe as your vendor, your third party. And all these goals, making models more auditable, traceable, controllable, especially AI automated decision. There was I think, fairly recent Google report that said if you want to improve model performance, take the humans out of the loop. More humans you take out of the loop, higher the performance goes. And sure enough, their data suggests that that is the case. However, I'm sure you guys know the story of the CEO who basically fired his entire human workforce, and then he later regretted it. Because taking humans out of the loop willy-nilly is not going to serve us better. It may improve model performance in a bit, but then you have all these other plethora of problems that will follow. So where should you even be taking out the human? Where should the human oversight remain? Unless you map that data, unless you have that data governance, that structure in place, those decisions are just darts. You're just throwing darts and hoping that things would work out. Might as well just like, pray and that's it. That's how we build a system. Continuous improvement. So trust isn't static, it's evolving with your system. So the bottom line is, just like it says on the slide, trust begins with governance, and RDG makes it the standard. Certification it's not just a seal, it's a signal. It's a signal that helps the stakeholders in any modality, whether you're in the phone, your VR, your MR, that these stakeholders, regulator and users and partners, they are trustworthy. These guys are telling you with that signal, hey, we don't just say we're responsible, we have proven it by going through RDG, which is not a mandatory regulation. It's how we move beyond checklists. It's how we move towards a system we can trust before harm occurs. And then let me just share how this RDG, XRSI RDG is different. And hey, Sam, thank you for joining. I'm just kind of going over this new standard XRSI responsible data governance certification in response to all the different challenges that we discussed for third-party risk management. So we have a public registry that people can look up, a seal of, we were talking about trust score model, a seal of trust that literally reflects that, hey, this vendor has achieved all these goals and gone through the pains of really mapping out their inferences, their biometric and all this kinds of data, the sea of data that you see behind me, real-time API that you can embed in your procurement workflows that literally is like, oh, that's a green, this vendor is trustworthy. Oh, this is engaged with XRSI. A certification that activates the moment you engage. So as soon as somebody says, hey, I'm going to pursue this standard, you will be sent to a certifying body. Our principal certifying body is Cautelare. So if today you're like, hey, this is awesome, I want to pursue this, I would send you to, because the standard is free. We will send you to a bunch of professionals in Cautelare, that's the principal certifying body, but to scale this, we'll have many more certifying bodies in the future. So in the end, I want to close where we began. Trust. It's not just a principle, it's a practice. So today you've seen the gap, you've felt the blind spots, and now you've seen the systems designed to close them before the harm occurs. The responsible data governance standard. It's a real free to publish. Actually, you can go right now to www.xrsi.org/RDG, where no one is excluded. You can download these standards. However, when you want to achieve that seal of trust, that certification, then we go ideas to action, and that's where Cautelare, our principal certifying body, comes in. So if you want to lead, signal trust to the world, and embed the governance where it really matters, that's the cautelares who you engage with. And so what happens next? If you do engage, you'll receive, oh, actually, regardless of you engage, since you are part of this roundtable, we will follow up with the full RDG standard. I'll deliver it to your mailboxes along with a fact sheet, along with an expression of interest form, which you might be able to use, or somebody else who wants to engage with this certification, the standard, whether you're beginning, already aligning internally, or seeking the certification. We're here to walk the path with you, because we need evidence, we need governance that works, and we need proof. And this is what RDG is kind of where it does. So in the end, I just want to invite you all to hone in on everything that we discussed and build that ecosystem of trust with me. And Oita, just last point is, it's so critical that we flip the script now to say, hey, if I don't see this, I'm not going to engage with those systems. So it's going to take a while to get there. But imagine a world where everybody is XRSI certified, which basically translates to these guys are governing data responsibly. At least that's the minimum basic layer. And then I'm sure we'll build more standards on top of it to really button it down and add to that layer of trust. I'll stop there, and if there are questions, I'd love to take any questions. There are multiple advisors from XRSI here that can also engage with you. So we're just going to stick around for another 10 minutes and take questions as needed. Yeah. Hey, Sam. Good to see you. Thanks for joining.
So thank you for putting this together. And one of the things I was going to put in chat is, it's so good to be in a space where people aren't afraid to use the word ethical. Because it's just been in different spaces, and everyone has become such a politically charged word, which is unfortunate. But anyway, it's just good. This has been good for me to be in this space. So thank you for putting this together.
Thank you, Ida. Honestly, though, I actually do have a bit of allergy with the word ethics and ethical. I would say why? Because
why is that?
I don't use that word until and unless I'm talking about solution. Because without solution, using those kinds of, oh, let's be ethical, let's be moral, let's be this, to me, I feel like I'm just like virtue signaling. So unless I'm offering a solution to go with that ethical talk, it's just tough. I see no point of just going round and round in circles and talk about ethics, but then at the end of it, we just all go home and we have no solution. So that's the only, kind of, whenever people try to me about ethics, and I'm like, what exactly am I solving here? Where is the solution,
But having said that, Kavya, as we speak, we can see organization creating new roles to do basically just that. They're hiring people with a policy background or product manager background, and they're creating or fusing roles, which is literally translating ethical principles to operationalizing risk scoring and monitoring and so forth. So it's a very interesting space, but it's still in the early days.
Precisely. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. So I believe we are pretty much on time. And with that, I would close the session. Sam, do you have any few comments to say? This is the new standard we put out. I would book a time with you to, discuss further into it. I know you have tremendous experience to support such a effort.
Let me make one comment.
Yes.
In chairing the board of directors of Space Information Sharing and Analysis Center, we're trying to do something which is essentially to encourage normative behavior among actors. This is the right thing to do, and behavior that conforms to the right thing to do becomes a norm. But there are actors who are not likely at any point in the near future to adopt that normative behavior unless there is an overwhelming consensus in the international community that this is what everybody's doing. And this is how norms eventually get formed, and eventually they become international law. But before they're international law, their normative behavior, and it becomes normative behavior when enough countries or enough actors subscribe to that behavior that it becomes inescapable, and that anybody who doesn't is seen essentially as a rogue, as an outlier, and loses their legitimacy. So one thing I would encourage is to consider, prioritizing those actors, to whom outreach would take place, and to try to encourage them to adopt the standard of behavior and to enlarge that circle of participants such that eventually it becomes inescapable. But you can't do everybody at once. Some will just say no, hell no, never. And they'll say that until finally they are the outlier and it becomes inescapable for them. So prioritizing the engagement strategy so that we build progressively a circle of those who adopt this behavior would be my recommendation. And since I tuned in late because I had a conflict and I'm off to something else, I'll stop at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Even those few minutes are just so valuable. And yes, thanks for sharing that insight. I'd love to reach back out and re-engage with you one-on-one when time permits, for sure. Thank you. So thanks, everyone. And with that, we will conclude this session. I really, really appreciate you engaging and kind of allowing me to share a bit of, solutions that we've built. But this is an Agile standard. With your insights, we'll keep on improving what this looks like. And that strategy that Sam just shared, it is exactly how we are going to get this thing adopted and potentially be the standard that we really aspire for it to be. Thanks again, and please be on the lookout for an email from me. I'll send you all the follow-up stuff that I just mentioned, and have a wonderful day. Thank you again. Take care.